My name is Nella Tolliver. I'm 36. Last March, my mother came out her storm door with her hand already open and took a certified letter out of mine. The name printed across the front of that letter was my own. There is a kind of mail somebody pays extra for, so it can go into one hand, only the hand of the person named on the front. You say the name out loud at the door before you let go. 4 seconds earlier, I had said mine out loud on that porch. Mail comes to my house, Nella, she said. Nobody wrestled anything away from me. My fingers came open. She signed the green card against the door glass with my pen. I reached past her. She put her shoulder in the frame, and the deadbolt went over. I clicked the pen shut and put it in my pocket. I had 41 boxes left, and I did every one of them. There is a chest freezer on my mother's porch. In October, a man in a suit asked her what was in it, and she said, "It keeps." She was not talking about tomatoes. Welcome back to Porch Stories, where the woman who carries everybody else's mail finally takes delivery of her own. Hit subscribe, and then tell me in the comments who in your family gets to decide what you are allowed to find out. $156,290 was inside that letter, along with a 30-day clock and 2 paragraphs my father wrote in pencil. 4 letters with my name on the front came to my mother's porch over the 9 months after my father died. She signed for all 4, and every time, I carried the green card back to the post office myself and put it in the dispatch. It took a man from a federal agency to tell me what I had been carrying. We have to go back to the 9th of June. March was only the morning I finally looked down. I carry the mail, 14 years now, 6 of them on my own route, Route 4. It runs out of the Chillicothe office, goes east on Blacktop about 4 miles, then gives up and turns to gravel for the rest of its life. 209 boxes, 51 miles, if you drive it the way it is laid out and do not cut the loop at the church. Say mail carrier, and people picture a sidewalk. Mine is a truck with the steering wheel on the wrong side and a plastic tray on the seat that holds 1 hour of the day at a time. In July, it smells in there like hot rubber bands and warm newsprint. In February, like wet gravel and coffee going cold with the lid off. And on the seat beside me, all day, every day, there is the satchel. The satchel is brown leather, government issue, and it was old when they gave it to me. Somebody before my time punched an extra hole in the strap with a nail. The flap has gone pale where it rides my hip. There is nothing beautiful about it. It is the thing I put anything in that cannot get lost. I have carried other people's bad news in it for 14 years. It never once occurred to me that it could carry mine. Remember the satchel. It goes everywhere in this story, including into a room with a folding table in it. And what comes out of it in that room is the whole thing. I have handed that kind of mail to a woman in a bathrobe with an oxygen line in her nose. I have handed it across a hay rack. I drove back out to the far end at 4 in the afternoon on my own time once, because a man had a doctor's appointment at 11 and I was not hauling it back in. If nobody ever puts a hand out, it goes home to the sender. That is the whole of it. You say the name at the door, not because you forgot who lives there. You say it because that name is the only place the envelope is allowed to go. A letter is not delivered until it reaches the hand it names. That sentence is not mine. It is the trade's. I have said it on porches to strangers for 14 years, the way you say a thing you were taught and never once tested. Then, last year, my own family made me find out what it is worth. The last box on Route 4 belongs to Ernestine Tarrington, who is 81 and has been at the end of that gravel for 60 years. Her house sits back off the road behind a windbreak. The only way to it is a 1/4 mile of lane that goes up across a field. That field was my father's, 19 acres. His father's before that. Ernestine had the window at the Chillicothe post office for 40 years. She sorted general delivery back when people still asked for it. She knows what a certified article is better than most of the clerks working now. When I bring one out to her, she is already coming down her steps, wiping her hands on the front of her shirt, because she does not intend to make a public servant wait on a porch. Ernestine has a 2-door Buick the color of a nickel and a bad shoulder. She has a deep freeze in her utility room full of half-pints she gives away faster than she puts them up. Every August, she hands me a jar of something through the truck window and will not take no. She is also, and I did not know this for most of my life, the reason my mother has not walked into that post office since 1972. We will get to that. It is the ugliest paragraph in here, and I will say it all the way through when we come to it. My mother is Nella Tolliver. She is 72. She lives on Cedar Bend in the house my father brought her to, which is box 171 on my route. 8 boxes before the turn. I have put mail in my mother's box 6 days a week for 6 years. The lid on that box does not shut right, so you have to lift and press. Inside the lid, in my father's marker, in his blocky all-thumbs printing, it says the name of everybody who has ever been entitled to what goes in there. His, hers, my sister Roxanne's, from when she was still at home, and mine. He wrote those names in 1998 when he put the box up. He never took a one of them off. I have looked at my own name inside that lid every working day for 6 years without thinking about it once. That sister is Roxanne. She is 40 and she lives an hour up the road. She comes down on weekends and handles what she calls mom's business, which is a phrase that covers everything from the water softener to who gets told what. Roxanne's whole position on me fits in one sentence. She has held it about 20 years, and she has never needed to say it twice in a row, because everybody in that family already knows it. You were never the responsible one. She said it when I did not go to college. She said it when I took the carrier exam. She said it the year I put a new transmission in a car instead of a down payment on a house, and she was right about the car. Being right about a car is the cheapest thing there is. And my father was Sebastian Tolliver. He drove a feed truck for the mill out on the county line for 31 years, and he died on the 9th of June. He was 78. He had been going down since Christmas, in the slow way that lets everybody stay polite about it. He kept his own accounts in a spiral notebook. He wrote his letters standing up at the kitchen counter because he said sitting down made a man wordy. He also had a habit of writing on whatever was in reach. Remember that, because it matters more than anything else I tell you tonight. He died on a Tuesday, in the front room, with the window fan running. I was on the route. I got the call at box 134, and I finished the loop, because there were people out that way waiting on medicine. If you want to know exactly who I am, that is the sentence. My father was dead in the front room, and I ran the last 75 boxes. Then I drove in and cased my truck out. Then I sat in the lot behind the annex and did not go anywhere for a while. We buried him on a Saturday. Ernestine came. She stood at the back in a navy coat, too heavy for June, and did not go through the line, and I did not understand that either at the time. Afterward, there was the part families do not talk about beforehand, where a lawyer you have never met has your father in a folder. Her name is Flora, and she is the attorney who settled my father's estate, and she has an office on the square over a shoe repair, up a stair that turns twice. She wears her glasses on a chain. On the corner of her desk, under a stapler, there is a bound book with a stamp mark on the open page. I did not look at that book twice for a year and a half. It is the thing that ends this. 10 days after the funeral, Flora sat my mother and my sister and me down and read out how my father had left things. It was about as plain as a life gets, everything to my mother. The 19 acres held in the estate until my mother says otherwise. My mother named to run it. Executor. My mother. And then one more line. The way there always is, for if my mother could not do it or would not, me. Not Roxanne, me. My sister sat back in that chair and made a sound I have heard my whole life. It is not a word. It is a little push of air out the nose that means somebody has made a clerical error. My mother laid her palm down on the tablecloth and said she did not want any of it. She was 72 years old. Roxanne said Mom shouldn't have to. Flora said that was all right. A person can decline to serve, and then the next one named gets notified and has 30 days to say yes or no. 30 days. Hold on to that number. 30 days to answer, and the letter that started them spends 7 months inside a chest freezer. And here is what I did with the most important half hour of my life. I nodded along in a chair by the window and thought about whether I had time to get the truck washed. I did not ask what the second name in a will means. I did not ask what notified means. My mother had just buried a husband. My sister was doing the talking, and I did what I have done at that table since I was 9, which is take up the least room available. That is my part of this. Nobody put it on me. I have had a year to decide whether I want to say it out loud on the internet, and I am saying it. I do not think I am the only woman who has ever been quiet in a lawyer's office out of politeness and paid the mortgage on it later. My mother filed her decline in the last days of June, and the same week, somebody filled out a form with my name on it. Here is what that form is, in the words I would use at a mailbox. You move. You tell the post office. The post office starts bending your mail toward the new place. It is a good system, and it works. And it does not need you to prove anything. For almost everyone alive, it is exactly what it looks like: a woman with tape on her fingers who does not want her power bill going to an empty duplex. The service does do one thing to check. When an order comes in, they mail a letter to the old address. It says, in so many words, "Somebody has told us you are moving, and if that is news to you, call this number." They mailed that letter to my apartment in June. I live over the laundromat on Hickory Street, 2nd floor. My box in that entryway is the 3rd one from the left. I have had the same key for 9 years. I got that letter. I know I got it. It came on a Thursday, because it always comes Thursday out of that facility. And I brought it up the stairs with a pizza box balanced on my forearm and set it on the microwave. Ask any carrier what is in her own mailbox. Ask her what is on her own counter. I sort other people's lives into 209 slots 6 days a week. My own mail lives on top of the microwave in a stack under a rubber band. The honest reason I did not open that envelope is that it was thin, and it was from work, and I was tired. It was still there in March. It was under a coupon book and a card from a tire place, and it had a ring on it from a glass. That is the sentence I would take back. Not the porch, not the letter she put her hand on. The Thursday in June, when the whole thing was 3 inches from my thumb and I put a drink on it. Now hear what my mother was doing that same week, because we were both handling paper. She sat down and wrote my name on the top line of a form. My apartment on one line, her house on the other. She signed it. She sent it in. Then she went and made supper. She did not file the kind that runs forever. There is a kind you can set to stop on a day you pick, and she picked the end of February. And when the lawyer's office asked her for her daughter's address, she gave them Cedar Bend. The form and the answer agreed with each other. Nobody in that office ever had one reason to look twice. If you have ever been the one in the family who gets spoken about in the 3rd person while you are standing right there, say so in the comments. And hit subscribe, because there is a chest freezer in this story and I want you here when the lid goes up. The first one came in July. Certified, green card stapled on the front, tracking number down the side. From the office of Flora, the estate attorney, addressed to Nella Tolliver. It came into the office in the accountable tray with 2 others, and I signed for it off the clerk the way I do every morning. Picture what that looks like from inside the truck, because everybody's picture of it is wrong. It is 7:40 in the morning. There is a plastic tray of accountable mail on the seat, banded. My own hand is doing 4 things at once. And the way you read those envelopes is you read the address, because the address is where the truck goes. Cedar Bend, 8 boxes before the turn. My mother met me at the porch that day. She had her hand out before I was up the steps, already talking about the gutter and whether I knew anybody. I looked at the front of that envelope. The address was hers, and the name was mine. And she said, "Mail comes to my house, Nella." I stood there for what I am sure was 2 seconds and could not make it mean anything. There is no drawer in a person for that. A woman who has known you since before you had a name is telling you a true thing about her own house. Everything in her voice was ordinary. She had a dish towel hanging off her wrist. She said, "It's the lawyer. It's all that estate mess. I'll bring it in." And I let go of it. She signed the card against the storm door glass. I put the card in the satchel and drove on, and 9 weeks went by before it crossed my mind again. The second one came in September. Same office, same green card, same 8 boxes before the turn. She was in the yard with the hose that time. "Mail comes to my house, Nella." The same 5 words, in the same order. I know now how a person gets a sentence that smooth. She had said it before, out loud, in the kitchen, to nobody. The third one came the week before Christmas. That one she took out of my hand while I was still saying the name. So the last syllable of my own name was still in my mouth when the envelope left it. 3 times, 3 green cards, signed Doreen Tolliver, in her handwriting. I carried every one of them back to the office in the satchel and dropped them in the dispatch myself. Somebody always asks how a woman who does this for a living let that happen 3 times. I have an answer, and it is not a good one. The address was right. Everything I am trained to check said yes. The truck was in the correct place. The box was the correct box. The woman on the porch had lived at that address for 40 years, and her name was on the lid in marker. The only thing wrong in the whole world was a line I had been taught to read out loud and had gotten in the habit of reading with my eyes. Under that, there is a smaller, uglier answer. She is my mother. When a certain woman puts her hand out, my hand opens. And it has done that since I was 6. It did it in July. It did it in September. It did it the week before Christmas. Every one of those times I told myself the thing you tell yourself, which is that this is family, and family is not a place where you make somebody produce identification. But first, the 4th of March. I remember the date. We were short a carrier, and I had 130 of Route 2 on top of my own. And it snowed that morning in the wet, stupid way it does in March, when it lands and quits being snow. That envelope was thick. You could feel it had more than a letter in it. The extra service on it was not the same as the other 3. There was a second box checked on the front. The sender had paid $6.95 beyond everything else so that it could go into one hand. One hand. $6.95. Keep those 2 figures beside each other. The other one is coming. I came up the steps, and the storm door was already opening. I did what the second box means. I said the name, Nella Tolliver. My mother stood in her own doorway and watched her daughter say her daughter's name out loud on the porch. She did not laugh. She did not blink. She put her hand out. "Mail comes to my house, Nella." I said, "Mom, this one's got my name on it." And she said, "Well, and you're standing here, aren't you? Nobody wrestled anything away from me." My fingers came open. I will say the next part straight, because it is the part I keep going back to. She did not snatch. She took it the way you take a plate from somebody who is drying dishes. Then she said, "You got a pen?" I gave her my pen. She turned the envelope over against the storm door glass. She went at that green card slow, the way she does everything with a pen. I stood on the top step 6 inches from her elbow and watched her do it. Then she pulled the card off the front and handed it to me. She reached back through the door, and the envelope went into the house. I said, "Mom." I got my hand as far as the frame. She put her shoulder into it, all 130 pounds of her. The door came to, and the deadbolt went over. Through the glass, she said something else. I did not hear all of it, because of the storm door. The part I heard was the end, never the responsible one. I stood on that porch with a green card in my hand, and snow coming through the yard light sideways. I did not knock. I did not yell. None of that was dignity. Ernestine Tarrington's box is the last one on the route. It was already 3:20, and there is a thing in me that will run a route with its arm cut off. I clicked the pen shut and put it in my pocket. I had 41 boxes left. I finished the route. Then I drove into the annex and put my accountable in. I ran that green card under the scanner with my own hand, the way I have run 10,000 of them. I banded it with the day's returns and dropped it in the dispatch to go back to the sender. I mailed it myself. 7 months later, a man read the back of that card out loud into a speakerphone. The scan on it was mine, at 3:41 in the afternoon, on Route 4. You would think that was the day it broke open. It was not. What happened next is that nothing happened for 8 weeks, the way nothing happens after most bad afternoons. I was angry the first night and embarrassed the second night. By the weekend, I had it filed under My Mother is Grieving, which is a folder that will hold an amazing amount of weight before it tears. I called the house twice. She was pleasant both times. She asked about my knee. Roxanne called me once that whole spring, and it lasted 4 minutes. What she said was that Mom was overwhelmed, and that the lawyer kept sending things, and that they had it handled, and I should not make it about me. Then she said it, no more heat in it than a weather report. You were never the responsible one. Then, the first week of May, a letter came from Flora, the attorney handling the estate. Not certified, just a letter, in my box on Hickory Street, where my mail had quietly started landing again in March without my ever wondering why. I opened this one standing up. It said that as I had not responded to the notice served on the 4th of March, the 30 days had run. I was deemed to have declined to serve. An application had been filed to appoint an administrator, and the applicant was my sister. And on the second page it said what the estate was holding, which was an offer to purchase the 19 acres on Cedar Bend, $156,290. I read that number in the entryway of the laundromat building, with the dryers going through the wall. The part that got me was not the size of it, it was the 90. Nobody offers you a round number for ground. Somebody had walked that field and priced it by the acre and come out at a figure with a 90 on the end of it, and it had sat in an envelope on my mother's side of a deadbolt since the 4th of March. I did not cry standing there. I sat down on the second step with my thumb over that number, and my ears got hot the way they do. A woman came in behind me with a laundry basket on her hip and asked, was I all right? I said yes, ma'am, and moved over so she could get by. The next morning, I did something I had never done in 14 years. I asked for my own records. You can do that. Anybody can. If a piece of mail was addressed to you, you can ask what happened to it, when it moved, where it was scanned. And on the ones people sign for, what the signature looked like. I filled out the request at the window on my own lunch. The woman who took it from me was Eugenie, the window clerk who trained me in my first month and has eaten lunch across from me for 11 years. Ernestine had that window for 40 years. Eugenie has had it since. Eugenie read what I had written down and looked up. 4? She said. I said 4. She asked me nothing else. At the time, I thought that was kindness. They came back in 9 days. 4 items. 4 delivery records. 4 images. I took the envelope out to the truck and sat in the lot with the engine off and laid them on the seat. I will tell you what lay on that seat before I tell you what it meant. 3 of them are my mother's signature, Doreen Tolliver. The D she has made since Eisenhower. The 2 loops that never close. The 4th one is my name in block capitals, Nella, a letter at a time, the way you print a name for somebody who is going to have to read it later. Same pen, same lean. My mother wrote my name 6 inches from my face while I stood there watching her do it. I could not get around it for about a week. Not the money, not the ground. My mother had my name in her hand, out where the weather could get at it, and she made it letter by letter on a card she knew strangers would read. Then she gave me the card, and I took it to the post office in my own bag. A letter is not delivered until it reaches the hand it names. I heard myself say it in the truck, out loud, to nobody. It came out the way a thing you have said too many times comes out. Then it landed differently, and I sat up. 2 days after that, I walked into the courthouse with the satchel on my shoulder and asked for probate. The woman at that counter is Frida Swinburne, who has been the county's probate clerk for a very long time. She wears a rubber thumb on her right hand all day, on and off the job, so the first thing you notice about her is that she is faster than you at everything involving paper. I told her I wanted to look at my father's file. She got it. Then she asked, without any particular tone, what I was hoping to find in it. I said I was trying to understand how a person gets 30 days to answer something they never got. Frida put the rubber thumb on the counter, which I have since learned is what she does, instead of sitting down. "Then you're asking the wrong question," she said. "The clock doesn't start when they mail it. It starts when it's delivered." I said it had been delivered. I said I had delivered it. "To who?" she said. And I said, "To the address." And Frida Swinburne said the sentence that took the next 5 months of my life and pointed it in a straight line. "The clock runs from delivery to the person named, not from the day somebody finally hands you the envelope." Sit with how ordinary that is. It is not a loophole. It is not clever. It is one woman with a rubber thumb telling another woman with a mail satchel a thing they both already knew in their separate trades, and neither one had ever had to say it out loud to the other. She said one more thing before she went back to her drawer. "The sender paid for that. That's what the extra money is. $6.95. $156,290. 2 figures on 1 envelope. Everything that happened to my family happened in the space between them." Hold on to Frida's sentence. A man in a suit says it back into a speakerphone in October, and my mother is on the line when he does. Now I have to give my mother her paragraph, and I will not hurry it, because a story that will not say where a woman came from is a story with its thumb on the scale. My mother was 18 in 1972. She had applied to a nursing program in Columbus. She had gotten in. There was a letter that said so, with a date to reply by. She never saw it. Her mother got it first. In that house, the mail came in the door and went into the pocket of an apron and got read at the sink, and what came back out of the apron was whatever the apron decided you were entitled to. She found her own acceptance letter 13 years later in a hat box in a closet she was cleaning out because her mother had died. By then, she had 2 girls and a husband on a feed truck and a kitchen she liked. There was nothing on earth to do with that piece of paper except stand in a closet holding it. She told me that story exactly once, at this same kitchen table, when I was 17 and had just told her I was not going to college. She told it flat and short, the way you hand somebody a tool. Then she got up and rinsed a cup. And here is the part I did not learn until this whole thing was over. The stack that went into that apron in 1972 got handed across a counter at the window by a young clerk who had been on that job 4 years. That clerk was Ernestine Tarrington. I can only tell you this part because she sat me down at her own kitchen table in the spring and told it to me herself, and she did not soften one word of it. She says she knew the woman asking was not the woman on the envelopes. She says she handed the stack over anyway because that was how it was done then, and because everybody in that county knew everybody. She has carried it for 54 years. That is why she stood at the back at my father's funeral in a navy coat and did not go through the line. And it is why, when my mother sees a Tarrington, she looks somewhere else. So no. I do not think my mother woke up one morning and decided to be a thief. I think a letter went into the wrong hand in 1972, and my mother learned the only lesson that house had to teach, that the family is not the people at the table. The family is whoever gets to the paper first, and then she did it to me. That is where the understanding stops. I have thought about where exactly to put the stop, and it goes right there. She was not in the dark. She is the one person in this county who knew to the ounce what it costs. She went and got the form anyway, and she wrote my name at the top of it in June. A woman who was robbed of a letter knows better than anybody what a letter is worth. That is not a reason. That is a price list. Subscribe if you are still with me. From here, it stops being about my feelings and starts being about a 1/4 mile of gravel and an 81-year-old woman, and that is the part I still cannot talk about without putting a hand flat on something. The offer had a condition in it. I did not know that in May. I knew it in July, when I finally sat down in Flora's office as a person with a question instead of a daughter being polite. She turned the offer sheet around on her desk and tapped a line near the bottom. The buyer was not a neighbor. It was an outfit that buys ground and rents it back out. Their sheet said what those sheets say, which is that the ground comes to them with nothing on it that is not written down. Nothing on it that is not written down. There is a 1/4 mile of gravel lane going up across those 19 acres. A woman, 81 years old, lives up at the far end of it, and that lane is her only way out to a road. It has never been written down anywhere. Not once. My grandfather told her husband to go ahead and put it in 1966. My father mowed both sides of it every June of my life. He put 6 loads of gravel on it over the years. He pulled a substitute carrier's truck out of the ditch beside it at 10 at night once. That is the entire legal history of Ernestine Tarrington's road. 3 men and a mower and 60 years of nobody being ugly about it. Sell that ground on that sheet, and the lane is a line somebody can close. $156,290. That is what the offer was, and the road up to that kitchen window was part of what it was buying. I asked Flora what happens to Ernestine then. Flora took her glasses off, which lawyers do not do, and said that in her experience, the new people are polite about it for a while. For a while. I drove out there that evening and did not go up the lane, because I did not have the first idea what I would say. I sat at the bottom of it with the truck running and the satchel on the seat beside me. The windbreak was full of birds doing the thing they do in July right before dark. Up at the top there was one kitchen window lit, and I could see her moving around in it. The paperwork in that satchel said I had declined to serve. I had never seen the paper I supposedly declined. And the woman in that window was going to lose her road because I got tired on a Thursday in June and set an envelope on a microwave. Here is a hard thing. Up until that evening, this was, to me, a story about my mother taking something out of my hand. Sitting at the bottom of that lane with the engine running is where it stopped being mine. Whatever was left in me that wanted an apology got up and left. What sat down in its place was a lot more useful and a lot less warm. An apology is a thing between 2 people at a table. A road either is on the record or it is not. The next Tuesday, I filed a complaint about the change of address. 8 days later, a man called me at 7 in the morning and asked if I could meet him at the annex before my start time. His name is Solomon Thackeray, and he is a postal inspector. He is a big, slow-moving man with reading glasses he keeps losing on top of his own head, and he writes down what you say while you are still saying it. I found that rude for about 10 minutes and have been grateful for it ever since. He did not call me ma'am. He did not call me Miss Tolliver. The first thing he said, after he shook my hand, was this: "You're the addressee on all 4 of these. That makes you the party. Everything I have, you're entitled to." That sentence stayed with me. I had spent 5 months being told by my own family that this was not about me. A man from a federal agency who had known me 40 seconds put it the other way around in 11 words. We went through it at the folding table in the audit room behind the workroom, which is where the office puts anything that needs a door. 4 mail trays on the table, a speakerphone with a crack across the case, a window up high with wire in the glass. I took things out of the satchel and he put them in a row. The 4 delivery records, the 4 signature images, 3 loops, and 1 set of block capitals. The letter from June with the ring on it from a glass, which I had gone home and dug out of the stack on the microwave, and which he handled like it was worth something. The letter from May saying I was deemed to have declined. Then he asked me the question that turned it. Who else keeps a record of a mailing besides us? And I said, the sender does. Flora's office keeps a mailing book. Every firm that sends anything certified keeps one, or a version of one. It is a bound book with a line for each piece. You take it to the window with your stack, and the clerk stamps the page in front of you. And that stamped page is the sender's proof that on that day, those pieces, with those services on them, went into the mail. That book had been sitting on the corner of Flora's desk under a stapler since June. Solomon Thackeray asked for it. Flora sent it over the same afternoon. He read it at the folding table with his glasses down for once. 1 line per item. 4 lines. June and September and December and the last week of February. He set the tip of his pen on the 4th line and turned the book around so I could see it. There was the tracking number. There was the fee. There was the extra service, checked and paid for, $6.95 in a clerk's ballpoint under a round stamp with a date in it. The stamp said the 28th of February. It reached my hand 4 days later on a porch. "Somebody paid for one hand," he said. "That's not a preference. That's the contract." I needed 2 workdays off the route in September, and a carrier cannot just not show up. So I went to Ginevra, who carries Route 7, and who has 3 grandchildren and a thermos the size of a fire extinguisher. I got about 4 sentences into it before she put her hand up. "Don't give me the whole thing," she said. "Give me the 2 days, and tell me if it's the Tuesday or the Wednesday you need somebody in that room with you." I said Tuesday. She said fine. She would take 4 and 7 both and be late, and that if anybody at the office had an opinion about it, they could come find her at the far end of a 51-mile route. Then she said, "Is that the old lady at the end of that gravel?" I said it was. "All right," she said. "I know that lane. Route 7 and Route 4 touch at a crossroads with a grain leg on it, and for 2 weeks in September, whenever we passed, Ginevra held up 2 fingers off the steering wheel, which meant nothing at all except that somebody knew. Solomon Thackeray drove out to Cedar Bend on a Wednesday, and I followed him in my own truck. There is a chest freezer on my mother's porch. In October, a man in a suit asked her what was in it, and she said, "It keeps." That is the whole of what she gave him. A federal officer asks a woman whether she is holding her daughter's mail, and the woman answers with 2 words about temperature. The freezer sits on the far side of the porch, past the swing. It has been there since I was a kid, and it has always been full of tomatoes and beans and 1 deer that somebody's cousin shot. It is white, with a padlock hasp that has never had a lock in it. He asked her twice. My mother stood in her doorway with her arms folded and said the other thing she says. "Mail comes to my house." Then he lifted the lid. What came out was mine, and it had been in there long enough to lie flat. The cold came up out of it the way it does. On the top, laid flat across the frozen packages, there were 9 bundles of mail, banded by the month. The bands were the wide brown ones off our own bundles, because those come to every house on my route, and she had a drawer of them. 9 bundles, June through February. Statements, a jury summons, 2 birthday cards from my aunt in Michigan with the flaps gone stiff. The renewal on my truck insurance. A postcard from a girl I went to school with, from Gatlinburg, that said, "Thinking of you," which by then was funny. And, on top of all of it, in a bread bag folded twice, flat and dry and cold, the packet from the 4th of March. I went down on my knees on those boards to look at it. The cold came straight up through my jeans. Solomon Thackeray got down on 1 knee beside me, a man in a suit on a porch floor, and he did not touch anything, and he did not hurry me. Inside the bread bag, the notice, the offer sheet with the 90 on the end of it, the certificate of mailing, and a piece of the back of a feed store calendar page, gone soft along the folds. My father wrote 2 paragraphs on the back of a calendar page in pencil, standing up at the kitchen counter, in the 9 months he had left. He carried it around in his cardigan pocket the whole rest of that time. Flora had it because he took it to her. He asked her to see that I got it. The first paragraph says the lane stays open for Ernie as long as she wants it, and that the ground is not to be sold out from under that. The second paragraph is 1 line long. Nella will see to it. Nella signs for me. My name in my father's blocky all-thumbs printing. The same printing that is inside the lid of my mother's mailbox. 8 boxes before the turn. He had written it down. He had written it down and paid a lawyer to hand it to me, and paid extra so it could go in nobody else's. It made it to within 4 feet of me on a porch in March. Then it went into a freezer under 9 bundles of my own mail, and my mother made supper. I knelt on those boards and read 4 sentences my father wrote. My ears went hot. My hands did not shake at all, which surprised me. Behind us, the storm door shut. Not slammed, shut. We went back to his car, and he stood with the door open and did the thing I have been carrying around ever since. He put a clipboard on the roof of the car and filled out a form in the cold, all the way down, and turned it around to me. It was an affidavit about the change of address order. My name was on it, my apartment, my mother's house, the June date, and a sworn line that said I did not authorize it and did not know about it. Everything on it was true, every word. "You'd be swearing to what you already told me," he said. "It goes to the prosecutor with the rest." I'll be honest with you about what that means. That's a different road than the one we're on. I stood in my mother's driveway holding his pen for what he later told me was close to a minute. "You are going to want me to have signed it. I know. Here is what I wanted, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. I wanted somebody official to knock on that storm door and say her whole name out loud. I wanted Roxanne to hear it from a neighbor. I wanted my mother to sit in a room where nobody in it was going to say Doreen was overwhelmed. I wanted her to be the one standing outside the door for once. I gave him back the pen. "Signing that turns my mother's name into a case number," I said, "and I would be the carrier who mailed it." He did not push back, and he did not call me noble about it. He clicked his pen, put the clipboard in the back seat, and said, "Then let's do it the other way. The other way is slower." Because there was another way. It did not need my mother in a courtroom. It only needed the truth about 4 envelopes. And the truth about 4 envelopes was already sitting in a bound book on a lawyer's desk. The story got out into town the way things do, which is not the way anybody plans. 2 weeks after the porch, I sat down across from Eugenie in the break room with my sandwich, in the same chair I have sat in for 11 years. She had her hands around her cup and she was working up to it. I let her. Finally, she said it. "It was 1 envelope, Nella. She's your mother, and she's alone out there." I said it was 4. And Eugenie said the thing that ended 11 years of lunches. "You know what I mean." I do know what she meant. I have known what people mean my whole life. She meant there is a size of wrong a family is supposed to absorb. She meant I had let a thing get bigger than the family. She meant a man with a federal badge on his belt had been on a porch on Cedar Bend, where nobody's business belonged but ours. The woman who taught me this job, who told me in my first month that you say the name at the door because that name is the only place the envelope is allowed to go. She taught me the rule, and then, when the rule was mine, she wanted it back. I finished my sandwich. I have not sat at that table since. And Ernestine Tarrington, 81 years old, at the far end of Route 4, called the office the following Monday and asked what she would need to do to be a witness for her carrier. What happens next happens in a room with a folding table in it. They set it for the last week of October, in the audit room behind the workroom, at 9 in the morning. The reason it was a room and not a courtroom is that nothing about it needed a judge. It needed the sender, the county, and the record. 2 of the 3 were on a phone. Folding table, 4 mail trays pushed down to one end, the speakerphone with the crack across the case. Frida Swinburne had sent over what the court needed, and the court did not need to be in the room. Flora was on the line from her office over the shoe repair. Roxanne was on the line. My mother was on the line, from her own kitchen, 8 boxes before the turn, and I could hear the clock she has had since I was born. I came down the corridor with the satchel on my shoulder. Ernestine Tarrington was on the bench outside that door in the navy coat, with her purse already on her arm and her feet already under her, up before anybody asked her to be, and she had been up a while. She did not say anything encouraging. She put 2 fingers on my forearm, hard, the way you check a fence post. Solomon Thackeray moved a mail tray to make room. I set the satchel down on the folding table and got the flap open. I took out 4 delivery records. I took out 4 signature images. I took out the letter from June with the ring on it from the glass, and the letter from May that said I had declined, and the bread bag, and the calendar page in a plastic sleeve. Then I sat down and did not talk. Everything I had to say was on that table, and none of it needed my voice. He laid the 4 green cards in a row, facing him. He read the mailing book first, line by line, out loud, into the speakerphone, in a voice like a man reading a parts list. Article number, date, service, fee. And on the 4th line, the extra, $6.95, paid on the 28th of February by the sender, for delivery to the addressee and to no other person. $6.95, holding $156,290 and a quarter-mile of gravel, and my father's handwriting. Then he read the third card. He read the name signed on it. He read whose hand the record says it was. He read the address it went to. Then he read the name printed on the front of the envelope. 2 different names, out loud, twice. Nobody on the phone said anything. Then he turned the 4th card around on the table so it faced me. There it was, flat under the fluorescent light, in a row with 3 others. 3 of them say Nella Tolliver, in the handwriting on every birthday card I have ever gotten. The 4th one says my name in block capitals, 1 letter at a time, in the same pen, leaning the same way. He turned it over. On the back was my own scan, Route 4, the 4th of March. 3:41 in the afternoon. I had carried my own name back to the office in that satchel. I had banded it and sent it on. It went to a lawyer's office over a shoe repair and sat in a folder from March until October, waiting for somebody to look at the front of it. I said nothing. I put 1 finger on the corner of that card and left it there. Solomon Thackeray took his glasses off and spoke to the phone. "Mrs. Tolliver," he said, "this article was addressed to your daughter and paid to go into her hand only. Do you want to tell me what happened to it?" And then came the part of this that I will hear until I am old. Nothing, for 41 seconds. He timed it. That is the kind of man he is, and afterward, he told me the number without my asking. 41 seconds is a very long time in a room with a folding table in it. The heater came on. Somebody rolled a hamper past in the corridor. I sat there and listened to my mother's kitchen clock come through a cracked speakerphone from 8 boxes before the turn. And she did not say 1 word, and neither did I. Then Flora asked that the 2nd paragraph of my father's memorandum go into the record. And she read it herself, off the copy, in her own file, in the flat voice she uses for anything. "Nella will see to it. Nella signs for me." She read it twice, because the line is short, and the connection was not good. I had heard those words once, on my knees, on a porch floor in the cold, with nobody there but the man kneeling next to me. That was the first time anybody else did. Roxanne was on that line. So was my mother. Nobody in that room said the next part out loud, and nobody needed to. The daughter that family had spent 16 months telling to stay out of it was the one person the estate had been sitting there waiting on. Then Solomon Thackeray said the rest of it, and he said it almost the way a clerk with a rubber thumb had said it to me across a counter in May. "The clock runs from delivery to the person named. It has not started." Then Roxanne's voice came up over the top of it. It was loud, and it was not for me. "You brought a federal inspector to your mother's front porch." Nobody answered her. Flora went on to the next thing. I have replayed that morning many times, and that sentence is the only part of it I would call a defeat, because it worked. It is working still. It is what got said at Thanksgiving. It is what a cousin of mine repeated to me in a parking lot in December, with her hand on my arm, gently. The way you tell somebody a thing for their own good. Not the freezer. Not the 9 bundles. Not the 4 envelopes. The inspector on the porch. You cannot argue with a sentence like that. It is built so you cannot. I have decided to let people keep it, and to spend what I have on things that get written down instead. Flora asked 1 question at the end, and it was a housekeeping question. She said the corrected notice would go out that week, and where should she send it? And I gave her my address. The whole thing, out loud, slow. The way you give an address to somebody who is going to write it down. Number, street, the apartment, the town, the zip. Then I said the other 5 words, and I said them to the phone. Mail comes to my house. Here is what the record does, which is all it ever does, which is not enough, and is the only thing that lasts. The order that moved my mail had already run itself out at the end of February, on the day my mother picked. In November, the Postal Service went back and voided it anyway. It does not care why. It cares that the person named never authorized it, and that is a form, and the form has a date on it now. The county accepted that the letter of the 4th of March was never delivered to the person it named, so the 30 days had not begun to run, which meant they had not ended. I was noticed again in the middle of November, and I answered it in 4 days. I signed for it at my own door on Hickory Street, from Ginevra, who was covering my own street that week, and who handed it to me with both hands and said, "I'm supposed to make you say your name." I said my name. I am the executor of my father's estate. I declined the offer as it was written. All of it. The whole $156,290. The reason was smaller than it sounds, and it was not a grand gesture. It was one line. That sheet wanted the ground handed over with nothing on it that was not written down, and there was something on it that was not written down, so I wrote it down. In February, a right-of-way for Ernestine Tarrington's lane went on the record at the county recorder's office. A 1/4 mile of gravel, described in feet and in stakes, running from the road up across 19 acres to a house that has been at the end of it for 60 years. It has a book number and a page number. Her granddaughter read it out loud in Ernestine's kitchen off a phone, all the legal parts. Ernestine made her read the part with the feet in it twice. That lane will be on the record after every person in this story is dead. Nobody has to be nice. Nobody has to remember. Nobody has to be alive. The ground may sell one day, and it will sell with that on it, and it will sell for less. That is what it costs. My father knew what it cost when he wrote 2 paragraphs on the back of a calendar page standing up at his own kitchen counter. My mother's part of this came to $216, which is what the estate charged back for re-noticing and Flora's time. Roxanne paid it. There was no case number, no courtroom. Nobody knocked on that storm door and said anybody's whole name out loud. I could have had that in October for the price of 1 signature on a clipboard on the roof of a car, and I have not changed my mind about it once. Solomon Thackeray asked me one more time, in November, in the corridor, whether I wanted to sign it. He is a thorough man. I said no again, and he said all right, and that was the last chance anybody is going to give me to do it the loud way. My mother has never once used the word sorry. She is not going to start. I stopped waiting for it somewhere around the middle of November, which I only noticed later, the way you notice a tooth stopped hurting. We speak, twice a month, on the phone, about the water softener and my knee. She has never mentioned the freezer. Neither have I. It is not a repair. It is 2 women being careful on a telephone, and it is what there is. And 6 days a week I put her mail in box 171 and lift and press the lid, because it does not shut right. My name is still inside that lid, in my father's marker. I have not scraped it off. Ernestine Tarrington is 82 now. On the first Tuesday of every month, I take the lane instead of the road. A lane that does not get driven grows in at the edges. A road that grows in stops being a road. I would rather put 6 loads of gravel on that hill than explain it to somebody 20 years from now. She has the storm door propped open with a brick before I am halfway up. She hands me a jar out of the freezer in her utility room with the lid on crooked, and does not take no. Last month, it was tomatoes. She does not bring up my mother. I do not bring up 1972. One time, in the spring, she said, "I should have said something at that window." And I said, "You're saying it now." That was the whole conversation. That is the end I got. Not a big one. A jar with the lid on, crooked, once a month, at the top of a road that exists on paper. A letter is not delivered until it reaches the hand it names. That is true of most of what a family hands you. It is not yours, because they meant it for you. It is yours when it gets to you, in your hand, with your name on it. Everything in between is somebody else's decision. That's my story. 1 green card printed in block capitals by a woman standing 6 inches from my face. 1 bread bag in a chest freezer holding $156,290 and a calendar page gone soft at the folds. And a 1/4 mile of gravel that used to be a kindness and is now a book and page number at the county recorder's office. So take this as your sign, and do it before the month turns. Go find out what address the world thinks you live at. Your bank, your insurance, the county, the pension, the pharmacy. Ask each one to read your address back to you out loud. Then go stand at your own mailbox and see whose names are entitled to what goes in it. It takes 1 afternoon and 2 phone calls. It is the cheapest thing you will ever do for the version of you that is going to need 1 envelope to arrive. And if somebody in your family has offered to take care of your mail while things are hard, let them help you with anything else on earth. Share this with the woman whose family changed her address for her and called it looking after things. Drop a comment and tell me about the piece of paper you were supposed to get and did not, and who was holding it. I read every one of these, and lately, I read them differently. Subscribe for more of these, the quiet ones, and the paperwork that stayed honest when the people in the room did not. That's all of it. Thank you for sitting with me on the porch tonight. I'll see you in the next one.